Hello, welcome in. Today I am here to talk about everything that I read in December. I actually read quite a bit in December. I was working really hard to finish my reading goal. So the first thing that I read in December was Once Upon a River by Diane Setterfield, which I was really excited about because I love her other book, The 13th Tale. I feel like she just has such a way with storytelling. Like, this is very much a story about stories, and I think the same is true for Once Upon a River. Basically, Once Upon a River is about an inn which sits on a river, and this inn has been around for hundreds of years, and it's always been really well known as the place to go to hear stories. But one night, the inn gets thrown into a story of its own when a man comes bursting through the front doors with a little girl who had been drowned, and they have the doctors check her out and everything, and she's dead, unfortunately. But then a few hours go by, and suddenly she comes back to life. Like, she wakes up and she's not dead anymore. And she doesn't talk, so she can't tell anyone who she is or where she came from. The guy who brought her in doesn't know her. But suddenly, several people from the town are claiming that they absolutely know for sure who she is. And it seems like all of these people truly believe that their story is the true one, but obviously that's impossible. I really loved this. I think that the plot itself was a little bit slow moving. I think some people would even call it boring, but I really loved it. I loved the atmosphere and just the vibes. It really feels like you're in some kind of folktale or fairy tale. There's like this essence of magic that permeates it that's like maybe something magical is going on, maybe not. And I think, again, Diane Setterfield is really good at writing stories about stories, and I love that. There were a couple things that I was a little bit iffy about. Like, I was a little uncomfortable with some of the potential messaging that I think a few of the characters' storylines may have been implying in the way that they wrapped up, but overall I thought it was really beautiful, and it was really fun to like be living inside of this story for a while. The next thing that I read that I really loved was Cersei by Madeline Miller. This is a Greek mythology retelling which revolves around the character of Cersei, who is a witch who was exiled to live alone on an island. And she's seen a few times in other people's stories like the Odyssey or like Jason and the Argonauts as like a small side character, even a villain. And this book obviously puts her at the center and lets her tell her own story from her own point of view. And I really loved this. Actually, I found her so relatable. Like, there were so many things that she was going through or feeling, and I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I've been there. I've felt that way. I've been in that kind of relationship. I've been treated that way. Like, she was so real and so genuine as a person and a character, and I just loved it. And I think that this book is a really beautiful exploration of a lot of things that a lot of people, especially women, go through. I really loved it, and I'm so excited now to read more mythology retellings. This was like the first one that I've read out of all of them that are so big now. So yeah, if you have any recommendations of where to go after this and like other mythology retellings, I would love to know what you think. The next thing that I read was actually a play that I read for class. I'm in a drama class and we read like a play every week, so I normally don't talk about any of them, but I wanted to talk about this one because it was really good. I really liked it. It was called Amadeus, and it's basically about the life of Mozart, but it's from the point of view of Mozart's like rival, his nemesis, a guy who hated him and was actually accused of being involved in his death. So I just thought this was such a fun play, like the scandal and the drama of it all. And I also loved it because it was so, like, the format of it was really creative, and the staging, just like the descriptions of what the stage should look like and what should be going on with the set. It sounded so cool and like ethereal and kind of like phantasmagorical. I don't know, I'll insert some pictures so you can kind of see what I mean, but I would love to see this live someday because it was a whole vibe. The next thing that I read was also for school. I'm going to talk about it too because it was 1,000 pages, and it was also a Stephen King book. It was Needful Things. Honestly, this wasn't the worst Stephen King book I've ever read. It's about this small town where a mysterious guy shows up and opens up a little shop, like an antique shop, kind of just sells random things, but they're all things that are like very specifically the exact thing that a person in this town really wants and really needs. But then in order to buy it, they have to do a favor for the shop owner, which a lot of them seem kind of like harmless little pranks or harmless tasks, but it all kind of like spirals out of control. Like, this man has masterminded the downfall of this whole town, and the people are so entranced and like so possessed by these objects that they're just out here doing wild stuff. And yeah, I think that I really liked the small town drama. Like, I think Stephen King should be writing small town dramas, small town romances even, right? Because I loved that, like the gossip and the judgment and the like subtle resentments between certain people in the town, or like the unrequited love between this person, that person. So good, so fun to read. But the horror elements, I don't know. I'm not quite sure if I really like Stephen King horror. I also feel like it was more of an action situation than a horror situation. It's really like fighting and violence and shooting and driving cars really fast and people with guns and stuff. And personally, I don't know, that's just how I feel. I'm not really a fan of Stephen King as a horror author, but if he was writing soap operas, I think I would be there. Anyways, the next thing that I read, I actually listened to on Librofm. As always, my favorite place to get audiobooks. There's a link down below if you're interested, but the book that I listened to was Whiteout, which was so cute. It is a book with several kind of intertwining romance storylines by Black authors about Black characters and set during the holiday season. There were some characters and storylines that I was more invested in than others, of course, but at the end of the day, they're all connected anyway. Kind of like, I don't know if you've seen He's Just Not That Into You or Valentine's Day, like kind of that style of thing. I love that format. I think it's so fun, and this book did it really well, and I loved it so much. Another book that I listened to on audio this month was Britney Spears' memoir, The Woman in Me. I loved this. I grew up on Britney Spears. Like, she was so big when I was a kid. Like, her first 3 CDs were my best friends. Those were my big sisters. Like, they raised me, right? And seeing her life play out since then has obviously been such a roller coaster. So it was really nice to finally hear her tell her own story. At first, I was a little bit disappointed that she wasn't narrating the audiobook herself, because that just would have been so good. Like, hearing this in her voice with all of her charm and her little accent, like, oh, it would have been so good. But I understand why she didn't want to do that. This was a very emotional audiobook, and also there's a part in it where she talks about how one of the biggest things for her since leaving the conservatorship is that she finally has the right to say no to projects that she's not interested in or doesn't want to do. So if audiobook narration was one of those projects that she just didn't want to do, I'm glad that she finally has the freedom to say no and to hire a narrator to do it for her. And I do think that the narrator did a really good job of conveying Britney's essence, like all of her charm and all of her sass and all of her humor. Like, I don't think Britney Spears gets enough credit for how fucking funny she is. Like, she's hilarious. And this book was so funny at so many points. The way that she's just like so subtly and so southernly like dunking on people. I don't know, I love her. And I think another thing that really shone through in this book is just how kind of emotionally intelligent and how self-aware Britney really is about who she is and what she is. And it's really sad to hear about how much of that was taken away over the years, but it was also really nice to see how much of that is still left and that she still has for herself. And so I really liked this book. The next thing that I read was Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This is such a throwback. This is like a YA fantasy from 2011 or something. I just figured, hey, now's the time to read this book. And this is actually really so sad for me, because the first half of this book I thought was the coolest thing I'd ever read. I was eating it up. I was ready to give it 5 stars. I was putting it on my best book of the year list. It was so perfect to me. It's set in Prague, which is the coolest city that a fantasy book could possibly be set in. I actually went to Prague for the first time this year, and it is such a cool, vibrant, amazing place. And the main character is this really edgy, cool girl who goes to art school in Prague, but she also was raised by chimera, like these demon people who are like half animal. The one who brought her up is a minotaur named Brimstone, but like picture he's very gentle and old and wise and like sitting by his little fireplace at his little desk doing demonic arts and crafts. And he has a little raven messenger, and there's like a giraffe person. So good. I was so into all of this, and then suddenly, like halfway through the book, it just changed. The author just said, okay, enough of that. Let's do something completely different now. And everything that I loved about it was suddenly no longer a part of the story. Like, we're not doing that anymore, and it turned into basically just like a romance. But even that could have been okay if it was a good romance, but it wasn't. It was just like this weird insta-love thing. And I was like, okay, this is not... I was catfished into this. But I liked the first half enough that I was like, okay, I'm gonna give the second book a chance to get back on track. right? Like, what if we just got back to the original plot of the movie? The second book was just about war. Like, not even the romance was happening anymore. We were just, again, doing something completely different. So I finally just Googled, like, does this car ever merge back onto the fucking freeway? And it turns out it does not, apparently. So I said, okay then, I don't need to read all this, which is sad and unfortunate, but it is what it is. I also had a couple other DNFs in December. One was A Crown of Ivy and Glass by Claire Legrand, which I actually listened to over 70% of, so I could have just finished it, but honestly, I could not bring myself to care. This is a fantasy about a girl whose family is in some kind of like cursed blood feud with another family, and she enrolls the help of this guy, and there's like demons involved somehow. And it's not like it was bad or terrible, I just really did not care about it at all. And I think maybe because I was listening to it on audio, sometimes I have a hard time getting pulled into the story on audio. But I will say that the narrator for this audiobook was so good. Like A+ to this narrator. Her voice, it was so gentle and soothing, and her accent was so fancy. And I wish that this voice could narrate my entire life. But it was also a 28-hour audiobook, and I just don't understand why an author needs 28 hours. Like, where is the efficiency? Where's the economy? At this point, I think I'm more impressed with authors who can use their words and their stories effectively, and who can convey so much through their text and their subtext that they don't need 10,000 pages to get their point across. You know what I mean? And I think that there is definitely a time and place for humongous books, and a lot of people really love them. And I think that if the book is really good and you're having a great time and you love the characters and you love the world, then of course, like, I would be really happy that the book was so long and I get to spend more time in it. But for the most part, personally, like 98% of the time, it just feels incredibly unnecessary. You didn't actually need that many pages, and it feels like a slog a little bit, and I just can't do the slog anymore. So unfortunately, this was the book that I was reading when I came to that realization. And then the last book that I want to talk about, another DNF unfortunately, was Breida by Paulo Coelho. I was really excited for this because I absolutely loved The Alchemist when I read it, and it felt like a really special and important, like life-changing kind of book to me at that time. And I've heard other people since then say that The Alchemist is trash and that like Paulo Coelho is like really gimmicky and preachy and like a self-help book wrapped in like spiritualism, basically. I didn't feel that way at all when I read The Alchemist. I really loved it. But when I started reading Breida, I got it. I get what people are saying. This felt really gimmicky to me. That was really sad. I don't know if The Alchemist was just better than this, or if I just happened to read The Alchemist at the perfect point in my life that everything lined up and I really liked it. But either way, it was apparently not the right time in my life for Breida to resonate with me, so it's better to put it down and make room for another book that maybe is the right book at this point in my life. You know, who knows? I feel like I've gotten a lot more comfortable with DNFing books this year, and I'm really proud of myself for that. So that was everything that I read in December. Let me know in the comments what you read in December, or if you have read any of these and what you thought. And also please let me know your recommendations for mythology retellings. I would love some advice on where to go after Cersei. So yeah, I hope that you had a good December as well. I hope you liked this video, and I hope that I get to talk to you soon. Bye!